we're going to go ahead and find the equation that meets the following criteria. So, and these problems come up both in 3.4 and 3.5. I would say the difference between a 3.4 problem, which these two represent, and a 3.5 problem is that here the point that we are given either directly, like here it says the y-intercept of 5 is one of the points on this line, which would be the point 0.5, or they indirectly give me the y-intercept. In this case, we'd have to solve this equation for y and get the y-intercept. That's a 3.4 problem. And because the specific point we have is a y-intercept, we could go ahead and use the slope-intercept equation, because we could directly put that y-intercept being given here and indirectly being given here in for b. In the next video, we're going to see problems from 3.5 where we'll have a point, but that point's not a y-intercept, and therefore we're not going to be able to use an equation where they're expecting us to know the y-intercept. We'll need a new equation for that kind of problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this problem. And here are some inputs. We already know a y-intercept of 0.5, and it says that we're parallel to this line. So indirectly, to be parallel is to have the same slope of this line. So we're parallel to 3x plus y equals 8. So if we could only solve this for mx plus b form, we could now know the slope of our equation that we're after, right? The line that we're after. Okay, so we want, as part of our outputs, we want a slope parallel to this. So we're going to go ahead and solve this equation for y, which is not very hard in this case. We'll subtract 3x over to the other side. That means the slope of our line is also -3. So we have -3 as a slope, and we also have 0.5 as a y-intercept, right? And this is how we got our output information that we need for our equation. We knew we were parallel to this, so the same slope. And we were already given a y-intercept of 5, so that was given. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just use those two pieces of information, plug them into this equation, and we will have the equation that meets the following criteria. An equation that has a y-intercept of 5 and is parallel to this line. And so it's going to be y is equal to -3x plus 5. On this problem, what's going to happen is we'd first have to go ahead and solve it for the y-intercept. So our input is going to be a y-intercept that's going to come from this equation. Now this is not the full equation we want, because our line is only going to share the y-intercept of this equation, but it's going to have a slope that's related to this equation. So far, let's get our y-intercept, and we'll worry about slope here in a minute. So let's solve this for y. We would divide everybody by 16 on both sides. And we won't worry about the slope of this line, right? We don't really have any connection to the slope of this line. The only connection we have to this line is we share a common y-intercept. So our y-intercept is going to be 0.2. And that is what we're going to carry over as part of our outputs. Okay, and what else do we know? We also know that we are perpendicular to this line. Now, I didn't give myself a lot of room here. I didn't use my space very well here, but let's go ahead and see if we can squeeze this in here. We're going to be perpendicular to the line 2y is equal to 1/3 x plus 4. So let's first solve this equation for y. Now, if I divide by 2, this is kind of a tricky problem because I happen to see this fraction here. I think instead of dividing by 2, I'm going to multiply by 1/2. it's kind of an unusual problem. And when I multiply this side by 1/2, I will now get the equation. This will become y. It's y I multiplied by 1/2. And this distributed will be 1/2 times 1/3 is 1/6 x. And 4/1 times 1/2 will be 4/2. Will this be plus 2 then, right? But the only thing I'm worried about is being perpendicular to 1/6. And we know that slopes are going to be negative reciprocals of each other when they're perpendicular. So the negative reciprocal of that 1/6 slope will be negative 6/1. And so my slope is going to be negative 6/1, or simply negative 6. So my output now is going to be sharing this y-intercept, and this slope is going to be y is equal to negative 6x. There's my slope, right? My slope of m is going to be negative 6x plus 2.